The Kiseki series, which is translated as the Trail series in English, heavily builds on shared plotlines and complex political intrigue across many games. And so, due to my current Sky FC replay and popular request over the years, welcome to part 1 of this detailed yet still condensed summary of the first Zemurian Trails game. There's a lot to cover, guys, so let's dive right in. The game begins with Cassius Bright arriving home late one night with a very unexpected present for his young daughter Estelle. No, it's not a new pair of sneakers, but a young and injured boy of all things. Now, once said boy is tucked into bed, Estelle turns to her dad to ask some obviously pressing questions like, how did this kid get wounded like this? And who exactly is he anyway? Is he a result of some secret love affair? Well, the only answer we get is that Cassius doesn't even know his name, and that apparently he only met him on business, whatever that's supposed to mean. That's when said boy wakes up and addresses Cassius by full name, telling him he must be out of his mind and that he should have just left him there to die. Fast forwarding to present day, we see that the once injured boy is totally fine now. Joshua has just finished playing a beautiful yet wistful sounding tune on his harmonica, earning Estelle's applause, then both head down for breakfast. After some lighthearted family banter around the table, it comes time for both Estelle and Joshua to head into town for their junior bracer qualification exam. At the Bracer Guild, their older sister figure, who also happens to be their bracer instructor, preps them for the test by first handing them a bracer notebook in which they must keep official record of all their jobs. Next up, the two get fitted for their orbments, which are mechanical devices that can enhance their physical abilities and allow them to cast magic. Now, the craziest thing about this entire setup process is that Estelle totally forgot about their test today. The real portion of it requiring the both of them to venture into the monster-infested sewers and retrieve the contents of a chest. Estelle is definitely tempted to open the two boxes they find, though Joshua reminds her that even taking a small peek could warrant an automatic fail for both of them, seeing as they'd have no right to open their client's possessions if this were a real bracer job. Once we return to the surface, Shara makes sure to check for tampering, so thank goodness we have a Joshua. Then, once the two kiddos report back to Aina, Shara hands over those very boxes Estelle was so curious about, in which they find the junior bracer badges that officially mark their successful passing of the exam. Shara is doubly happy she had the opportunity to train the two, seeing as it was Cassius who trained her when she was still a junior bracer. Then, on their way out of the guild, Estelle and Joshua happen upon some younger kids from Sunday school. Luke is an especially precocious one and can't believe Estelle, a girl, was able to become a bracer before he did. He says he's gonna go train some more at his secret base, then runs off with his friend Pat in tow. Anyway, Estelle and Joshua run some errands, and right before they head out of town, they're stopped by a flustered Aina. Apparently, Luke and Pat were seen heading towards the dangerous tower north of town, so Cassius's help is needed ASAP. Estelle and Joshua argue that time is of the very essence though, so if they head off now, they may be able to stop the kids before they even get to the tower. Aina is hesitant at first, seeing how we've only just become junior bracers today, but she agrees with our reasoning. So Estelle and Joshua take off for Esmela's tower while Aina contacts Cassius. Fortunately, the bright kiddos make it in time, though Estelle makes the rookie mistake of turning her back on the still dangerous situation. She could have had a chunk of herself eaten by a monster if it weren't for her dad arriving just in time to save her behind. So not only does Cassius steal our thunder, but he also leaves reporting back to the guild to us as well. Then, on the way home, Estelle becomes surprisingly reflective and voices some doubts about whether she's cut out to be a bracer, considering how her mistake today could have ended badly for Luke. But with Joshua's encouragement, Estelle's back to her chipper self in no time. Arriving back at home, Estelle delivers the letter addressed to her dad from the Erebonian Guild branch that Aina entrusted to us. Now, whatever its penned contents may be, it definitely doesn't sound good. Over dinner, Cassius breaks the news that he'll have to leave on business starting tomorrow morning. Then, later that night, Joshua catches Cassius out on the front porch, where they cryptically speak about something Joshua said from way back when he first joined the Brights 5 years ago. Whatever it was, Cassius responds that no matter what ends up befalling Joshua in life, these past 5 years cannot be erased. In other words, Joshua will always be a part of the Bright family. Then the next morning, Cassius leaves Roland via airship, and Estelle and Joshua get started on the jobs he's entrusted to them, starting with a request from the Perzel farm. Monsters have been eating their crops, so they've requested an extermination from the Bracer Guild. They're also nice enough to invite Estelle and Joshua to stay the night since the monsters only appear once the sun has gone down. Now, after the kiddos give the monsters a good beating, Joshua finds he's the only one still recommending that they finish the job. But since Estelle and the Perzels believe the fuzzy things have learned their lesson now, Joshua relents on killing them. But once it's just him and Estelle, he mentions that something about his heart must be broken, because even now, he still believes they should have eliminated those monsters completely. Estelle won't let Joshua talk about himself like that though, and manages to get him out of his funk. And in all actuality, she's happy he shared such a personal trouble of his with her for once. The next morning has us carrying out a job for the mayor himself. The miners have uncovered a large Esmelus crystal, and it's up to Estelle and Joshua to transport it from the mines to Mayor Klaus. Now, unfortunately, due to a new recruit's mistake, we're also tasked with emergency evacuation duty when monsters come pouring out of a cave-in. Though, once everyone is all safely back on the surface, gutsy Estelle pulls a prank and pretends to have lost the crystal, much to the mine chief's chagrin. Now, back at the mayor's place, we catch him chatting with a very refined girl who appears to be a visiting student. Mayor Klaus explains that this Esmelus crystal will be used to create an engraved ornament as a 60th birthday gift for Queen Alicia from the town of Roland. He places the crystal in a big safe, then Estelle, Joshua, and Josette all take their leave. The next job is a request from the Liberal News. Now, unfortunately for the up-and-coming reporter Niall, Cassius Bright is no longer in town, so there goes his interview with said legend. He'll just have to make do with an escort to the mysterious Esmelus Tower, I guess. Now, as for his photographer Dorothy, she is quite the airhead, and poor Niall even has to pay out of pocket for one of the gadgets she broke at Melder's Orbital shop. Nevertheless, they're both very skilled at their chosen crafts. At the top of Esmelus Tower, the four come across a man who introduces himself as a scholar of archaeology. We learn about the Septarians, 7 treasures that were supposedly gifted to humanity by ATLUS, that have since been lost over 1,200 years ago. Apparently, one such treasure, called the Aureole, slumbers somewhere in Liberal, and Professor Alba theorizes that the device on this tower's rooftop may play into that. Anyway, Dorothy snaps some photos for Niall, Professor Alba takes a closer look at that device, and Joshua gets a chance to rest a bit, since he's actually been feeling a bit woozy since they stepped onto the rooftop. Then, once they've all made it back into town, Estelle and Joshua manage to catch Shara at the Bracer Guild, right as the mayor rushes in, completely out of breath. Apparently, while he was out of the home, the Esmelus crystal was stolen. Shara leaves the investigation of the ransacked office to us kiddos, while she gets more of the story from the mayor. And after thoroughly scouring the place for clues and hearing testimony from the mayor's wife and maid, Estelle and Joshua present their findings and theory to Shara. Together, they narrow down the list of suspects to Josette, as unbelievable as that sounds to Estelle and Mayor Klaus. Now, seeing how the airport receptionist claims he hasn't seen any girl wearing the Genis Royal Academy uniform around recently, this points to Josette having traveled on foot, which reminds Estelle that she and Joshua found a survey leaf during their investigation. Shara recognizes those from the Mistwalled Forest, so the three hurry on over and discover the thieves right as Josette starts bad-mouthing Estelle and the mayor for being so easily deceived. It turns out she had to put on the act since one of the guys, that new recruit at the mines, screwed up his job in the first place. But anyway, we give them a pummeling and get the crystal back. Though, unfortunately, we're unable to take these Sky Bandits into custody before their sweet ride shows up. Now, back at the guild, Estelle and Joshua are recognized for their outstanding investigation and for securing the crystal, even if the bandits did manage to get away. So Aina hands over an official recommendation from the Roland Guild branch. Because you see, in order for a junior bracer to become a senior bracer, one must obtain a recommendation from each of Liberal's 5 major regions. So that's 1 down, 4 more to go for the bright kiddos. Though unfortunately, the celebratory mood is cut short when Aina receives dire news from the Bose branch. An airliner has disappeared over Bose airspace, with Cassius having been listed on its passenger list. Such news marks the end of the prologue. That night, Joshua and Shara start to worry about Estelle when she takes a while to come down for dinner. But it turns out they were worried over nothing. She was just busy packing for the trip to Bose, since there's no way she's just gonna sit around and wait in Roland. Shara decides to tag along as well, since she can't leave such a huge case to a couple of newbies. Before they depart the next morning, Estelle takes Joshua to the top of Roland's clock tower and shares the real reason why she avoids coming here. During the Erebonian invasion 10 years prior, the Imperial Army surrounded Roland and began bombarding the clock tower to try and get the civilians to surrender. Young Estelle had climbed to the top to get a better view and couldn't get away when the bombs started dropping. Yet it was her mother who shielded her from the rubble, saving Estelle at the cost of her own life. Since then, Estelle has avoided coming here. Not necessarily because she has bad memories of this place, but because she didn't want to become over-reliant on her mom's spirit. Though with her dad missing and everything, Estelle wanted to draw on her mom's strength just this once, asking her to watch over him and bring him home safely. With that, Estelle, Joshua, and Shara set out for Bose on foot since all Liberalian flights are currently grounded. Upon reaching the city, the party's first stop is the Bracer Guild. They hear that the military is currently leading the investigation into the airship incident and is currently preventing the Bracer Guild from entering the area. This appears to be the work of General Morgan, who is known to have a great disdain for bracers. Now, fortunately for us, the mayor of Bose has just recently put in a request with the guild. She wants us bracers to conduct an investigation of our own, completely independent of the military. So Lugren entrusts the request to us and sends us on our way to get the actual details from Mayor Maybell. It turns out she believes the bracers are much more suited to investigating and bringing this incident to a close, seeing how we're not in an actual war right now. And for the sake of all the merchants at the Bose market, it's of the utmost importance that the airliner is found as soon as possible, since the current grounding of all flights has had a huge negative impact on their supply chain. Mayor Maybell pens a letter for us to give to General Morgan. As the official responsible for overseeing the entire region, she is requesting information about the incident. Then she sends us off to the Hacken Gate, the massive rampart that separates Liberal from the Erebonian Empire. Anyway, we are finally called in to see General Morgan, who is none the wiser about our status as bracers, what without our badges. Apparently, we have a hijacking case on our hands, the culprits being none other than the Sky Bandits who got away back in the prologue. They're apparently so brazen now that they even sent a ransom note to the Queen herself. Unfortunately, Estelle can't stop from blabbing her big mouth and totally blowing our cover, which leads to us getting chased out by a very pissed general and his men. Shara is absolutely not taking his BS though, and accuses the entire military of botching their jobs. They've known about the Sky Bandits and their burglaries for months, yet they've always passed those cases to the bracers. The argument really starts to get heated between Morgan and Shara, though that's when the blondie from earlier shows up and breaks into song, lute accompaniment and all. It was just the kind of de-escalation that was needed though, and after proper introductions and thanks to Olivier, we escort him to Bose. He dashes off to enjoy Liberal's sights while we report back to Maybell. Now, something about this situation has been bugging Joshua and Shara. It's just strange that this incident has gotten so out of hand, given that Cassius, with all his skill, was on board the flight. Anyway, we remember seeing Niall and Dorothy in town, so we scope out the journalist to see if he has any other leads. Thanks to some give and take with Joshua, Niall gets the missing link for his article. Meanwhile, we get a tip that has us heading to Ravenue Village. On the way there, we run into another bracer, Agate the Heavy Blade. Shara introduces Estelle and Joshua to him, and he's rather unimpressed with us both. Estelle especially seems like an amateur to him, but he's reassured that Shara is on the case with us. Agate's unwanted comments aside, the Elder of Ravenue points us to our witness, a young boy on the docks. He says that on the night the airliner disappeared, he saw two shadows flying by in the night sky, one small one and one large one. The army said they scoped out the area and found nothing, but we parse through the section ourselves and find evidence that there has been movement in the abandoned mine. Inside, we catch the Sky Bandits in the process of loading the airliner's cargo onto their own ship. And like always, they get a beating from us, though unfortunately they get away again by using the good old smoke bomb technique. But what sucks is that General Morgan's troops are actually waiting for us right outside. We are taken into custody on suspicion that we're working with the Sky Bandits, even though it's the army that probably has the mole, considering what Kyle said earlier before we beat them up. Now, crazily enough, we find Olivier in the cell right next to us for drinking the Auntie Rose's legendary vintage wine, the Grand Chardonnay that auctioned for 500,000 Mira. The next morning, we find out that we're being released thanks to Mayor Maybell. She told General Morgan that he had taken Cassius Bright's children into custody, and since Morgan and Cassius were good friends back when the latter still served in the army, Morgan has decided to let us go. Though he storms off right away, since just the sight of us reminds him of Cassius's retirement from the military. And as for Olivier, he is very lucky, since Mayor Maybell is the owner of the Auntie Rose, and the very person who bid on that Grand Chardonnay. She finds him amusing and makes sure he's released, then takes him up on his offer of helping us out. Turns out while we were locked up last night, there is a major burglary in the South Block. The army is currently investigating the place and really gives us a hard time. Or well, that is until a new face shows up. Colonel Richard of the Army's Intelligence Division is a breath of fresh air, since he's more than courteous to us bracers. Thankfully, he has the rest of the soldiers clear out, which finally lets us gather testimony from the residents. One elderly man says his fishing buddy down by Valeria Lake saw some suspicious people while he was night fishing recently. So that's where we're headed next. Since we have some downtime until nightfall, Estelle, Joshua, Shara, and Ollie all pass the time in different ways, with Shara's drinking buddy tactic actually being a ploy to get Olivier absolutely wasted and out of harm's way, seeing how he is a civilian and all. In the cover of night, we spy on Josette and Kyle's interactions with a couple of masked men, and instead of dealing with them all right away, we let the Capuas lead us back to their ship. And hey, Olivier has sobered up enough to join us again, and even comes up with the bright idea of sneaking a ride on the airship back to the bandits' actual base. We eventually find the hostages, yet Cassius is nowhere to be seen. Apparently, he disembarked the airliner right before takeoff, and they had no time to update the passenger list. So that's one part of the mystery solved. But anyway, we need to secure the Sky Bandit leaders before we can evacuate the hostages. Behind the final door, we eavesdrop on a strange conversation between the three Capua siblings. Dawn nonchalantly says they'll just kill the passengers after the payout and be on their merry way, which leaves his siblings flabbergasted. They want to know what the hell happened to him, since such bloodthirst is completely out of character apparently. The weirdest thing though is after we beat them up, Dawn seems to snap out of it and appears genuinely confused about the airliner hostage situation. It honestly sounds like he can't recall any events since Josette left for Roland last chapter. Anyway, they pull the same smoke bomb technique and make a run for it while a whole bunch of their subordinates bar our way out of genuine gratitude and loyalty to them. But unfortunately for them, and us technically, the Royal Army has swooped in for the arrest, essentially taking official credit for resolving this incident. Now, of course, it's frustrating for Estelle, but in the end, what's most important is that all the hostages are safe now and the culprit has been caught. Back in Bose, we fill in Mayor Maybell and Lugrin on everything that transpired, our efforts earning Estelle and Joshua a coveted recommendation from the Bose Guild branch. They also receive a letter from their dad and an additional parcel from an anonymous sender. Cassius's letter details how he's run into some trouble and likely won't be back until the Queen's birthday, which is not for a couple of months still. And as for the package, we find a strange black orbment within, and an even stranger note penned by someone going by the letter K. Olivier takes a look at this orbment and thinks it may be something else entirely. It actually seems like an artifact, or in other words, an original orbment from the fallen civilization of 1200 years prior. All of this weird news is truly troubling to Estelle, so to cheer her up, Joshua suggests they use this time while Cassius is away to travel around Liberal and work on achieving their senior bracer status. So now that Estelle and Joshua have their next step figured out, Shara, with Olivier in tow, heads back to Roland via airliner. And speaking of said trip back, Shara eavesdrops on a very sussy remote conversation of Olivier's, conducted via an artifact, an item that should have been confiscated by the Septian Church. When confronted and questioned about what he's really after, Ollie admits that he's been looking for Cassius Bright all along. So Estelle and Joshua take Shara's advice that she herself took from Cassius. They decide to travel on foot so that they can familiarize themselves with the very regions they are meant to protect. So we end up having to share a room with Agate at the Crone Pass checkpoint that night. He's still a jerk to us, though he does change his tune a bit after we help him defend the place from a large pack of wolves. The next day, we make our way to Minoria Village and buy some boxed lunches to eat by the ocean. What follows is quite the romantic picnic, though Estelle remains totally oblivious as to why it could be construed that way. Then on the way back into town, a little boy ends up bumping into Estelle. He seems like a good kid at first, but after he's run off, Joshua realizes that he pickpocketed Estelle's junior bracer badge. So we track him down to the Mercia orphanage, and also happen to find the same girl that Estelle bumped into earlier in Minoria. The motherly matron Teresa makes sure we get the badge back, and continuing on our way to Rouen, Clem manages to begrudgingly apologize to Estelle thanks to Chloe's encouragement. Then once we reach the beautiful seaport city, Chloe gives us a tour of the place while we wait for the Bracer Guild's meeting to finish. Now down near the warehouse area, we run into some sleazy delinquent types who apparently call themselves the Ravens. They quickly deflate though after finding out Estelle is a bracer, and when coupled with the arrival of the mayor and his steward, the punks completely back off. Back at the guild, we learn that a royal will be in town, and lo and behold, said jerk-ass duke steals our room at the hotel that night. Then the next morning, the guild receives terrible news that the Mercia orphanage burned to the ground during the night. But luckily, the matron and the kids are all safe and are currently in Minoria village. Anyway, we are tasked with investigating for signs of arson. Chloe arrives while we're conducting our search and is obviously distraught at the wreckage, but Estelle does a good job comforting her friend. Then Chloe accompanies us to Minoria Inn and takes the kids downstairs so that Estelle and Joshua can freely discuss things with Matron Teresa. Apparently, a man with silver hair cleared the way and saved their lives after they were trapped by the burning debris, though he left after calling the villagers over to help fight the fire. While we are discussing these things, Mayor Dalmore arrives to offer his condolences. His steward Gilbert insinuates that the Ravens must be responsible, though the mayor shuts him up right away. Then the latter offers his villa in Gransel to the matron and the kids for as long as the rebuilding process takes, though Teresa refuses to make a hasty decision regarding this. We find out that Clem was eavesdropping and stormed off after hearing about the Ravens, so Chloe, Estelle, and Joshua hurry to Rouen and arrive just in time to prevent Clem from getting beaten to a pulp. You see, Chloe has been trained to fight with a rapier when it's to protect others, and she definitely proves her worth against these guys. Having heard about the situation from Jean, Agate pops in and really shows them who's boss as former leader of the gang before Cassia set him on the right course. Meanwhile, we follow Clem and Matron Teresa to a safer area, where Clem apologizes for putting himself in harm's way. While his bravery is to be commended, he needs to leave these fights to those trained to handle them. With that, Matron Teresa and Clem return to Minoria while we go ahead and report to the guild. Now, to our dismay, we're all taken off the arson case when Agate claims investigative rights. But that does leave Estelle and Joshua open to accepting Chloe's request. You see, the Genis Academy Festival is coming up shortly, and they're still looking to fill some roles for their school play. Chloe thinks Estelle and Joshua are just who they're looking for, so our new Bracer commission involves helping out at Genis. But before we head over, we just have to solve the first ever Phantom Thief B quest in the series. Then, at Genis, Chloe introduces us to her friends on the student council, Jill and Hans, and thus begins a series of fun days for Estelle and Joshua, ones where they get to experience hanging out with fellow peers their age. And even though Joshua is mortified with his role in the play at first, he clearly also enjoys such days at Genis. Of course, I can't fail to mention how this part of the game is where Estelle actually starts seeing Joshua in a new light, especially seeing how Chloe's role in the play has her kissing Princess Joshua at the end. Once the festival officially gets underway, we see a variety of familiar faces everywhere, including Matron Teresa and the kiddos. That silver-haired man that saved them from the fire is also spotted, apparently, and Joshua gives chase at some point, but loses track of him. Anyways, the student council surprise finally comes to light after the curtain closes on the fantastic play. Just when Matron Teresa breaks the news about deciding to take the mayor's offer in Gransel, Dean Collins, Jill, and Hans present her the funds that were raised by the festival. It's Jenna's tradition to donate these funds to some kind of charity each year, you see, with this year in particular seeing more donations than normal since the public heard they would be going towards rebuilding the orphanage. Now, sadly, all the good vibes just have to be cut short when Teresa is attacked on the way back to Minoria Village. Thankfully, only sleeping powder was involved, so Bracer Karna and Teresa will be okay. But the masked men who attacked ended up stealing the money. Clem has grown up a lot in just these past couple days though, so even though he wanted to go after those guys really badly, he knows now to leave these things to people like us. Agate finally arrives and actively enlists our help, and despite his skepticism of Sieg at first, Chloe's friend successfully leads us to the exact place we need to be. Something very odd is going on in the lighthouse, since these Raven blokes seem to be under some drug-induced hallucination, which has made them way stronger than they are normally. Then at the top of the lighthouse, the truth behind this chapter's entire arson plot is uncovered at last. Mayor Dalmore and Gilbert are responsible for burning down the orphanage and plan to have the Ravens framed for it. All because it was in a prime location to build luxury real estate. They knew Teresa would never have sold it, since her late husband Joseph worked so hard to build that place with her. But now with no money, she and the kids will have no choice but to leave Rouen. So Gilbert at least gets his just desserts when he's shot in the leg by his own High Rees, making him one of the only characters in the entirety of Trails to bleed. The masked men make their escape via rope though, so Agate keeps up the pursuit and leaves everything else to us. Thankfully, Bracer Karna has woken up from the sleeping powder and takes up guarding the Ravens and Gilbert. But now comes the hard part. The Bracer Guild has a strict non-interference policy when it comes to governmental affairs, which is why they're able to have branches all over the continent. But so in regards to this case, that means us Bracers will probably have no authority to take the mayor into custody. On the way back to Rouen, Chloe briefly splits off from Estelle and Joshua, claiming she forgot something at the academy and will catch up to us. Then at the Bracer Guild, Jean contacts the Royal Army to spearhead the mayor's arrest, while we head over to his estate to stall him. And what do you know, we catch him completely red-handed, attempting to sell the asshole Duke Doonan a future vacation home and everything. Niall shows up at the perfect time too, with the mayor's likely motive. Dalmor is actually in a mountain of debt due to his failed speculative trading in Calvard. This news is absolutely infuriating to Chloe, seeing how the mayor could have liquidated his own assets, like this very estate even, to pay off that debt. But instead, he chose to burn innocent people's memories to ashes. The mayor sicked some vicious canine monsters on us, though we managed to defeat them fine. What follows is nearly impossible to overcome though. Mayor Dalmore's family heirloom is an artifact that completely immobilizes us, and if it weren't for that strange black orbment in Estelle's pocket, all three of us would have met an untimely end. But with his artifact neutralized, Mayor Dalmore takes off via orbital boat while we give chase. Though unfortunately the sail on his ship gives him a clear advantage, and so just when it looks like he's gonna get away, a massive airship descends right in front of the mayor, effectively cutting him off. It turns out to be the Arcee, the Royal Guard's newest and cutting-edge airship, one that has not even had its official unveiling yet. So it looks like once again, the The Royal Army will be taking most of the credit for resolving the incident. But oddly enough, just like Dawn of the Sky Bandits, Dalmar also can't recall any of his actions since the start of this chapter. And on another odd note, apparently Colonel Richard was the army contact Jean called earlier, so it sure is interesting how Lieutenant Julia Schwartz was able to get here faster than he did. It's almost like she has a contact so secret that it even beats the intelligence division's resources. But anyway, Estelle and Joshua wrap up the chapter when Jean awards them a recommendation from the Ruan Bracer Guild. Yay! But yeah, please like and subscribe if you like this story summary, and come join our welcoming Discord community at discord.gg/LadyVirgilia. Also follow me on Twitter and Twitch for Trails Tuesdays if you'd like. And lastly, I want to thank all my wonderful patrons for their support, especially Jared Breland, Andreas Hansen, Captain Hobo, NT Luck, Big Clingy, Sam Bezjak, Thomas Perez Jr., Francesco Santoyo Rego, Silverwind847, Sathya Selvaraja, M. Meownalin, Gigi Sora, Platinum Rose, Malcolm Lowry, Killer Ninja 151, Melanie Gutierrez, Shadow Ace, Unholy Biscuit, and Leviathan 8685.